the past 36 hours, hundreds of vigils have been held around the world honoring the Pulse nightclub victims, some as far away as South Korea, Australia, and France, others closer to home, including New York City, San Francisco, Dallas, New Orleans, Seattle, Chicago, D.C., and of course here in Boston. But no matter where the city, the message is the same. It's one of solidarity.
50 people who I didn't know, but were part of my community, were killed. And they were killed for exact reasons that I could be killed.
Our clubs will not close. Our bars will not go under. We will not be forced back into the proverbial closet that they wish that we lived in.
Joining me now is Sean Cahill, Director of Health Policy Research at the Fenway Institute. Sean, it's good to see you again. And Elias Vivas, he's Interim Director of the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition in Boston. Eli, good to meet you. Thanks so much for being here. Barney Frank said on this station earlier today, former Congressman Frank, it could have been me. Did you both have similar reactions when you heard about this thing yesterday morning, Sean?
I mean, that's the nature of hate crimes and hate violence, is that they're targeting a particular group of people because of who we are. So I think a lot of us have felt that. A lot of us have been very traumatized by this, kind of in shock by it. But, you know, whether it's an attack on a black church or a Jewish community center or a gay bar, they're targeting a group of people based on prejudice against that group and hatred of that group.
Do you feel it as personally?
Right, and I agree with that, and it's mostly because when we think about it, you know, as we just closed Pride weekend for Boston, a lot of our communities were out in celebration, they were out at the parade, they went out later at night on a Saturday night, and in similar situations, and I've heard this from friends of mine, and, you know, from me personally, those places are very sort of places that we feel that should be safe, and that has been taken away.
But as horrible as this was in terms of volume, it's not aberrational. Roughly, what is it, 1 out of 5 hate crimes are targeted on the sexual orientation of the people at whom it's directed. So this is not that unusual, except that there are 49 dead people as opposed to 1 or 2 or something like that.
Right.
I mean, it's not that unusual, sadly, to target LGBT communities, right?
Yeah, well, I would counter that by saying that this is a very particular case of hate crime because it's really a place where a club where that was mostly people of color. So when you see all of the images on screen, they're mostly Latino, Hispanic, Black, gay men. And so for us as a community, for me as a director of a center for queer communities of color, that's really hit hard to home. It hits a lot of nerves. It makes us feel like, you know, we want to be celebrated. We want to sort of survive and thrive. And this is really sort of hit hard home. It has made us feel very nervous and afraid for ourselves in a way that, you know, is oftentimes for us in terms of disparities altogether something that we experience every day. Now we're sort of experiencing all of these things.
Are you heartened by the politicians' reaction or no, Sean?
Well, I'm glad.
Or does it depend on the politician, I guess?
You know, I think everybody's united against violence and against murder of people
not everybody.
For who they
I was
are.
on social media today, sadly, not everybody at all, but go ahead.
Well, but I think it's important to point out that for a lot of us in the LGBT community, we've actually been under political attack for the last couple of years. There's been a wave of anti-LGBT legislation, particularly in the southern states. There's been about 200 anti-LGBT bills filed this year alone, this calendar year, in about 32 states. And many of those bills have passed in North Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee, Florida considered an anti-LGBT bill, but defeated it, thankfully. But so
you're saying the politicians are hypocrites, essentially? They're supporting it today?
No, but I think that it's important to understand that you know, we deserve the right to have a job, to be able to rent an apartment, to be able to, you know, go to a restaurant, ride the subway or bus and not be harassed.
To live and breathe.
And that's what those laws would protect. And a lot of the conservative politicians are against those laws.
You know, speaking of conservative politicians, one of the things that put me totally over the edge yesterday, I was listening and watching CNN nonstop. Rick Scott's the governor, was interviewed by Jake Tapper in the morning, and repeatedly, he kept saying to Rick Scott, so are you taking any special precautions, like we on the radio asked Maura Healey today, the Attorney General, for places where gays and lesbians are most likely to congregate? Maura Healey said yes. Rick Scott couldn't even get the words gay and lesbian out of his mouth. He would say, we protect all Floridians. I'm paraphrasing. We care about all Floridians. So this puts a lot of conservatives in a very uncomfortable position, because I assume they care about human life, but at the same time, they don't want to be aligned with sort of a gay and lesbian cause or something, which to me is insane.
Right, and I would sort of go off of what Sean was saying, that they may or may not be hypocrites, but I think in this experience, again, it goes back to this idea of victims of color. Like, how do you identify if you are not a person of color? And that might be hard for them to sort of feel. So as we say it, so we need to really sort of examine the idea of what that would look like, what those narratives look like, what those families are suffering and struggling through, what the young people, queer people of color in clubs who want to go there, who want to celebrate themselves feel like, what are they going through?
Isn't it possible that some of those families didn't even know that the person they lost in that slaughter was gay to begin with? It's possible some of those young men and women didn't.
That would be possible. There's definitely also scenarios where those families had separated themselves from their loved one,
right.
And then those loved ones or those individuals were definitely at that place to be safe, to be themselves, and now they're gone. And what does that look like for their family?
Obviously, people have to go forward, and I have to say, I had really mixed feelings. You only have a minute left. We had a number of gay and lesbian people call the radio today and saying the positive thing was, the solidarity, the mile-long lines to give blood, but it's a perverse benefit. People had to die in huge numbers for people to come together and support. I mean, is something wrong with this picture, right?
I mean, it's important that hate violence is not distributed evenly in this country. It's not an equal opportunity offender. There are certain groups that are singled out, African Americans, Jewish Americans, LGBT people. Every year, about 20 LGBT people are killed in this country because they're LGBT. And it's disproportionately gay men, transgender women, and people of color, and particularly, Latina transgender women, black gay men. So they're particularly vulnerable to violence and abuse, and it happens at a low level, kind of a background level, throughout the year.
Well, at minimum, I hope it heightens awareness, if nothing else, after this horror. Sean, thank you for your time.
Thank
It was
you.
really good to meet you. Thank you so much.